Tonight we will embark on a gentle journey, not to a destination, but into presence. We will explore the timeless wisdom of the Buddha, teachings that have served as a refuge for restless minds for over 2,500 years. Welcome to Sleepy Monk, a sanctuary where ancient wisdom meets the stillness of night. Here, there is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, and no one you need to become. You are already complete, already whole, exactly as you are in this moment. If this path calls to you, if these teachings bring you peace, I gently invite you to subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you join a community of seekers who gather here each night to rest in the profound simplicity of the Buddha's wisdom. But there is no pressure, no obligation. Simply allow these words to wash over you like warm water, like gentle rain on willing soil. Tonight, as you prepare to surrender into sleep, we will explore the teachings that the Buddha discovered beneath the Bodhi tree over 25 centuries ago. These are not religious doctrines to believe in or philosophical concepts to understand. They are invitations to see clearly the nature of your own experience. They are doorways into a peace that does not depend on circumstances being any particular way. They are old friends greeting you after a long journey, reminding you of what you forgot but never truly lost. The Buddha taught that suffering is optional, not pain. Pain is part of life, woven into the fabric of existence. But suffering, the mental anguish we add to pain through our resistance, our clinging, our endless wanting things to be different than they are, this is optional. This can be released. And in that release, we find a peace so deep, so complete, that sleep becomes not an escape from life, but a natural rest in the midst of life's constant flow. These teachings are not rules to follow. They are invitations to look directly at your own experience with honesty and compassion. They are experiments to try, practices to explore, ways of being that you can test against the laboratory of your own life. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Trust your own direct experience above all else. So settle now into whatever position brings you comfort. Let your body sink into the surface beneath you. Feel the gentle pull of gravity, inviting you down, down, down into deep rest. There is nothing more for you to do tonight, nothing to accomplish, no one to impress, no goal to reach, just breathe. Let us begin this journey together. Breathe in slowly through your nose, filling your belly with air. Hold for a moment at the top and release through your mouth with a soft sigh. Again, breathing in the present moment, breathing out all effort, breathing in this invitation to rest, breathing out all resistance. Good. The first teaching we will explore tonight is one of the Buddha's most fundamental insights, the truth of impermanence, what he called anicca in the ancient language of his time. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. Everything that comes together will eventually fall apart. Everything that is born will eventually die. This is not pessimism. This is simply the nature of reality. And when we truly understand it, when we stop fighting against it, it becomes a doorway to profound peace. Let us turn now to our first story. In a village surrounded by mountains where mist clung to the valleys each morning and the sound of temple bells echoed across the rice fields, there lived a potter named Sato, who was known throughout the region for the beauty of his work. His studio sat beside a small stream, and the sound of flowing water was the constant companion to his craft. Sato had been making pottery for 45 years, ever since he was a boy of 10, apprenticed to his father. His hands knew the feel of clay so intimately that he could work almost with his eyes closed, sensing through his fingers alone when the thickness was right, when the curve was true, when the form wanted to take shape. He made rice bowls and teacups, sake vessels, and flower vases, each one shaped on his wheel with patient attention, each one fired in his kiln with decades of accumulated knowledge. But Sato's true mastery showed in his tea bowls. Collectors from the capital city would travel for days to acquire one of his pieces. Masters of the tea ceremony sought him out, willing to wait months for him to create a bowl specifically for them. Each bowl was unique, the glaze flowing in unrepeatable patterns, the form slightly irregular in the way that showed the maker's hand, the weight and balance perfect for the ceremony of preparing and sharing tea. Sato took deep pride in his work, not the harsh pride of ego, but the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman who has devoted his life to mastering a single art. When he held one of his finished tea bowls, turning it in his hands to examine it from every angle, he felt a sense of completeness. This piece of clay, that had been formless earth just days ago, was now something beautiful, something useful, something that would bring pleasure and meaning to people's lives for generations to come. His studio was lined with shelves holding his finished work, waiting for buyers or for firing. Dozens of pieces at various stages, some still drying, some bisque-fired and ready for glazing, some glazed and waiting for the final firing. Each one represented hours of work, years of skill, a lifetime of dedication. One autumn evening, as the light was fading and Sato was preparing to close his studio for the night, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A deep, low rumbling that seemed to come from the earth itself. The floor beneath his feet began to shake, gently at first, then more violently. An earthquake. Sato stood frozen in the center of his studio as the world moved beneath him. The shelves began to sway, and then, as if in slow motion, he watched his life's work begin to fall. Tea bowls tumbling to the floor, vases sliding off shelves, rice bowls shattering against the hard earth. The earthquake lasted perhaps 30 seconds, though it felt like an eternity. When the shaking finally stopped, Sato looked around his studio in shock. Nearly everything was destroyed. Shards of pottery covered the floor. 45 years of accumulated work reduced to broken pieces in half a minute. For a long moment, Sato stood in the center of the destruction, unable to move. His mind was blank, emptied of thought by the shock. Then slowly, feeling began to return, and with it came a wave of grief so intense he thought it might crush him. All that work, all that beauty, all those pieces that would never bring joy to anyone now, gone. He sank to his knees amid the fragments, picking up pieces, trying uselessly to fit them back together, knowing it was impossible but unable to stop trying. His hands, so skilled at creating, were now helpless to repair what had been broken. Hours passed, darkness fell. Sato remained in his studio, surrounded by the ruins of his work, feeling a pain he had never experienced before. It was as if part of himself had shattered along with the pottery. His identity, his purpose, his life's meaning. All of it seemed to lie in pieces on the floor. Finally, exhausted and empty, he stood and walked out into the night. Without conscious decision, his feet carried him up the mountain path toward the small temple that overlooked the village. He had been there many times to deliver tea bowls to the monks, but he had never gone seeking anything for himself. Now, he didn't know what he was seeking. He only knew he couldn't bear to be alone with his grief. The temple's main hall was dark, but a light shone from a smaller building to the side, the abbot's quarters. Sato approached and knocked softly. After a moment, the door opened to reveal an elderly monk named Daichi, whose eyes held the calm clarity of long years of meditation practice. "Sato," the monk said, his voice warm with recognition. "Come in. You look troubled." Sato entered the simple room and sat on the cushion the monk offered. For a long moment he couldn't speak. Tears ran down his face. Finally, the words came. "Everything is destroyed. The earthquake, all my work, 45 years, all gone." Daichi nodded slowly, his face full of compassion. He stood and went to a shelf, returning with a tea bowl, one of Sato's own creations, a piece the potter had given the temple years ago. It was beautiful, with a deep blue-black glaze that seemed to hold the night sky within it. "This bowl survived," Daichi said, holding it gently. "Do you remember making it?" Sato nodded, unable to speak. "Tell me," the monk said, "when you made this bowl, did you believe it would last forever?" Sato looked at him, confused. "No, of course not. All pottery can break. That's the nature of clay." "So you knew, when you made it, that someday it would be destroyed?" "Yes, someday. But not like this. Not all at once. Not everything." Daichi set the bowl down carefully between them. "So, the surprise is not that your bowls broke. The surprise is when they broke, how they broke, how many broke at once." "Yes," Sato said, feeling the truth of this. "I knew they were impermanent, but I thought I had more time. I thought they would last longer. I thought I could create many more before the impermanence became real instead of theoretical." Daichi finished gently. Sato sat with this. It was true. He had known intellectually that his pottery was fragile, temporary, subject to breaking. But somewhere deep inside, he had believed, or perhaps hoped, that it would last, that his work would outlive him, that these objects he had created would carry some part of himself forward into the future, beyond his own death. "Why does it hurt so much?" Sato asked. "They were just objects, just clay and glaze and fire. Why do I feel like I've lost part of myself?" Daichi smiled sadly. "Because you poured yourself into them, your time, your skill, your attention, your love. In a way, they were part of you, and so their destruction feels like a destruction of self." "Yes," Sato whispered. "That's exactly what it feels like." "But tell me," the monk said, leaning forward, "the skill that made those bowls, did that break in the earthquake?" Sato paused. "No, I still have my skill." "The knowledge you've accumulated over 45 years, did that shatter?" "No, that's still here. The love you have for your craft, did that fall and break into pieces?" "No," Sato said, beginning to understand. "That's still whole." "Then what was lost?" Daichi asked gently. Sato thought carefully. "The objects themselves, the specific bowls and vases and cups that I had made. Those are gone. And are objects the same as the skill that makes objects? Are finished pieces the same as the ability to create pieces?" "No," Sato said slowly. "They're not the same." Daichi picked up the surviving bowl again, turning it in his hands the way Sato himself did when examining his work. "This bowl is beautiful," he said, "but it is not the beauty itself. It is a temporary expression of beauty. The beauty comes through you, through your hands, through your heart. The bowl is just one moment when that beauty took form in clay, and that moment, like all moments, passes." He paused, letting Sato absorb this. If you tried to hold on to this bowl forever, try to preserve this moment forever, you would suffer, because nothing can be held forever. Everything flows. Everything changes. Everything that has form will eventually lose that form. This is not tragedy. This is just the nature of existence. But all that work, Sato protested, though more weakly now, all those hours and days and years, was it all for nothing? Was the bowl nothing while it existed? Daichi asked. While it held tea? While it brought joy to those who used it? While it expressed the beauty you saw and felt? No, Sato admitted. It was something. It was real. Exactly. The bowl was real while it existed. It fulfilled its purpose. It expressed beauty. It served its function. And now it exists in a different form, as fragments, as dust, as clay returning to earth. Its form changed, but the reality of its having existed, of its having been beautiful, of its having served, that cannot be destroyed. Sato felt something loosening in his chest. So, the earthquake didn't destroy what was real. It only destroyed the form? Yes, Daichi said. And more than that, the earthquake revealed what was always true, but easy to forget. That form is temporary, that all things arise and pass away, that this moment we're in right now will also pass. This conversation will end. This night will give way to morning. This life will eventually give way to death. And all of this is not tragedy. It is simply how things are. They sat in silence for a long time, the tea bowl resting between them. Finally, Sato spoke. So what do I do now? Do I make more bowls, knowing they will also break? Knowing that everything I create will eventually be destroyed? Daichi smiled, and there was something almost joyful in his expression. Yes, you make more bowls. Not because they will last forever, but precisely because they won't. Each bowl becomes more precious because it is temporary. Each moment of creating becomes more full because you know it will pass. When you truly accept impermanence, you don't stop engaging with life. You engage more deeply, more fully, more presently, because you know this moment is all you have. He picked up the bowl and offered it to Sato. In Japan, there is an art called kintsugi, he said. When a precious bowl breaks, instead of throwing it away or hiding the damage, the pieces are reassembled with lacquer mixed with gold. The cracks are highlighted rather than hidden. The bowl becomes more beautiful for having been broken because the golden seams tell its story. They show that it has lived, that it has survived, that it has been transformed by its breaking. Sato took the bowl, holding it as if it might break at any moment, which, he realized, it might, at any moment. Can I tell you something? Daichi said softly. I dropped this bowl last week, right here on this floor. It should have shattered, but it landed on a cushion and rolled to a stop without even chipping. I stood there, shaking, realizing how close I had come to losing it. And in that moment, I saw clearly. I was already suffering from the bowl's eventual breaking, even though it hadn't broken yet. I was already grieving for its future loss, and I understood that this is what we do. We suffer not only when things break, but in anticipation of their breaking. We suffer not only when things end, but in fear of their ending. He paused. But if we truly accept that everything will end, that nothing lasts, then we are free to love things completely without the fear of losing them. Because we've already accepted the loss. It's already included in our love. Sato sat with these words, feeling them work their way into his understanding. The grief was still there. That was natural. The loss was still real. But something else was present now too, a kind of peace. A recognition that the earthquake had not taken anything that couldn't be taken. That the true gift he had to offer, his skill, his love, his dedication, was still whole, still available, still ready to create beauty in the world. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I will clean my studio, I will gather the pieces, and I will begin again." Daiichi nodded. "Yes, you will begin again. Not because you have to, but because the creative spirit in you wants to express itself. And each bowl you make from now on will be more alive, more present, more precious, because you will know, deeply, that it is temporary, that it exists only for a moment, and that this moment is enough." Sato left the temple as dawn was breaking over the mountains. The village below was beginning to wake, and he could see other buildings that had been damaged by the earthquake. He was not alone in his loss. Everyone had lost something. This, too, was part of the teaching, that loss is universal, that impermanence touches everyone, that we are all in this together. He walked back to his studio and opened the door. The destruction looked no different than it had the night before. But something in him had changed. He no longer saw only loss. He also saw possibility. Clay could be reclaimed from some of the broken pieces. The fragments could be used in new ways, incorporated into new designs. And most importantly, his hands still knew how to shape clay. His heart still held the love of creating. The earthquake had destroyed the objects, but it could not destroy the wellspring of creativity that had made those objects possible. Sato spent that day cleaning, gathering, organizing. And the next day, he sat down at his wheel and began to make a new bowl. His hands moved with their familiar skill, but something was different. He was more present, more aware of each moment of the process, more alive to the feeling of wet clay under his fingers, the sound of the wheel turning, the emerging form taking shape. He knew this bowl would someday break, perhaps in another earthquake, perhaps dropped by accident, perhaps simply worn down by decades of use. But that knowing didn't diminish his care in making it. If anything, it increased his care. Because he understood now that the bowl's value was not in lasting forever. Its value was in existing beautifully right now, in being created with love right now, in expressing what wanted to be expressed right now. And when the bowl was finished, when he lifted it from the wheel and examined it in his hands, he saw it differently than he had seen his work before. He saw it as a temporary guest in the world of form, a brief appearance of beauty that would shine for a moment and then return to the formless. And this seemed not sad, but appropriate, not tragic, but natural, not a flaw in the design of existence, but the very nature of existence itself. Years later, people would say that Sato's work became more beautiful after the earthquake, that his bowls had a quality they had never had before, a kind of poignancy, a sense of preciousness, a depth that touched something in those who held them. They didn't know the story of that night in the temple. They didn't know about the conversation with Daiichi, but they could feel somehow that these bowls were made by someone who understood the temporary nature of all things. Someone who loved the clay, knowing it would return to dust. Someone who created beauty, knowing it would not last. And that knowing made the beauty more real, more present, more alive. This story reveals one of Zen Buddhism's most fundamental and liberating teachings, the truth of impermanence, or anicca. The Buddha taught that everything in the phenomenal world is constantly changing, constantly in flux, constantly arising and passing away. This is not a philosophical position to debate. It is an observable fact that we can verify in our own direct experience every single day. Look at your own body. It is not the same body you had 10 years ago. Every cell has been replaced multiple times. Your thoughts are constantly changing. One thought arises, persists for a moment, and is replaced by another. Your emotions shift and flow. The circumstances of your life evolve. The people around you change. Nothing stays the same. Everything is in constant transformation. And yet, despite this obvious truth, we resist it. We cling to things as if they could last forever. We grasp at relationships as if they won't change. We hold on to possessions as if they won't decay. We try to freeze moments in time as if we could preserve them. And this clinging, this resistance to the natural flow of change is the root of so much of our suffering. When Sato's pottery was destroyed in the earthquake, what caused his suffering was not the destruction itself. It was his attachment to the pottery, his identification with it, his belief that it should last, his resistance to its ending. The objects were always temporary. He knew this intellectually, but he hadn't truly accepted it in his heart. He hadn't made peace with the impermanent nature of all forms. The teaching of impermanence is not meant to make us sad or nihilistic. It's not saying that nothing matters because everything ends. Rather, it's inviting us to love things more deeply, precisely because they are temporary. When we truly accept that this moment will pass, that this experience will end, that this person will one day be gone, we become more present, more appreciative, more alive to the preciousness of what is here right now. Think of cherry blossoms, which are revered in Japanese culture precisely because they are so brief. They bloom for only a week or two each spring, and then they fall. If cherry blossoms lasted forever, would they be as precious? Would people gather to view them? Would poets write verses about them? It is their very impermanence that makes them so beautiful, so poignant, so worthy of attention. This is true of everything. Your life is more precious because it is temporary. This day is more valuable because it will not come again. This breath is more real because it will soon be replaced by the next breath. When we stop resisting impermanence and instead embrace it, we find a strange paradox. Life becomes both more poignant and more peaceful. Poignant because we feel the preciousness of each passing moment. Peaceful because we stop fighting against the inevitable flow of change. The Buddha taught that there are three characteristics of all phenomena: impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. These are deeply interconnected. We suffer, dukkha, when we resist impermanence. We do cling to things because we believe they are part of our permanent self, anatta. But when we see clearly that all things are changing, including what we call self, we can let go. We can release our grip. We can flow with life rather than fighting against it. This doesn't mean we become passive or detached. Sato didn't stop making pottery after the earthquake, but he made it differently. He made it with a deeper understanding, a fuller presence, a clearer acceptance of the nature of things. His work became more beautiful, not despite his acceptance of impermanence, but because of it. In your own life, how can you work with this teaching? How can you embrace impermanence rather than resisting it? Start by simply noticing it. Notice how thoughts come and go. Notice how feelings arise and pass away. Notice how the sensation of a breath appears and then disappears. Notice how this very moment is already becoming the past, even as you experience it. And as you notice, ask yourself, can I be present with this moment, knowing it will pass? Can I love this experience, knowing it is temporary? Can I engage fully with life, knowing that everything will change? When you can answer yes to these questions, you touch a kind of freedom. The freedom of someone who is no longer trying to hold on to water. The freedom of someone who can appreciate the river precisely because it flows. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let this teaching settle into your awareness. Everything is changing. Everything is flowing. Everything that arises will pass away. And this is not a problem to solve. It is the very nature of existence. When you stop resisting it, when you stop fighting against the flow, you find a peace that is always available. The peace of simply being here, now, in this moment, which is all any of us ever truly has. Let your body relax into this understanding. Each breath arises and passes away. Each thought comes and goes. Each sensation appears and dissolves. You don't need to hold on to anything. You can let it all flow. You can rest in the constant change, like a river that is always moving, but somehow always at peace in its flowing. Breathe slowly now. Feel the impermanence in your own breath. The in-breath arises and passes. The out-breath arises and passes. Nothing is held. Nothing is frozen. Everything flows. And in that flowing, there is a profound peace. A peace that doesn't depend on things staying the same. A peace that can be present in the midst of constant change. Rest in this. Let yourself be carried by the river of impermanence rather than trying to dam it or control it or make it stop. Trust in the flow. Trust in the change. Trust that you can meet each moment as it arises and release it as it passes. This is the wisdom of impermanence. This is the path to peace. Let us pause here for a moment. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, a quiet anchor in the flow of time. Allow your body to soften, releasing any tension you might be holding in your shoulders, your jaw, your belly, your legs. Let gravity pull you down into the surface beneath you, down into rest, down into the acceptance of this moment exactly as it is. You are here, you are present, you are breathing, and in this moment, everything is actually okay. Not perfect, not forever, but okay right now, and right now is all you ever have, all you ever need. If these teachings resonate with you, if they bring you comfort or insight or peace, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Let Sleepy Monk become a nightly sanctuary where you return to rest in ancient wisdom. But there is no pressure. Simply receive what is offered and let it settle where it may. Breathe deeply. Feel the peace that is available when you stop resisting change and simply flow with it. Let yourself rest in the constant river of transformation that is your life. You are safe in this flow. You are held by this flow. There is nothing to fear in letting go. Now, when you are ready, we will continue our journey with another teaching, another story, another doorway into the peace that is always available when we align ourselves with the nature of things rather than fighting against it. Let us turn now to another fundamental teaching of the Buddha, one that is intimately connected to impermanence, the teaching of dukkha, often translated as suffering, but perhaps better understood as unsatisfactoriness or the inherent difficulty of existence. In a city known for its silk weavers, where the sound of looms filled the air from dawn until dusk, and the markets overflowed with bolts of fabric in every color imaginable, there lived a master weaver named May. She was the finest weaver in the city, perhaps in the entire province. Her silk was smoother than water, her patterns more intricate than frost on a window, her colors more vibrant than a sunrise. May had been weaving since she was a small child, learning at her mother's side, her small fingers gradually developing the skill and sensitivity required to work with silk threads so fine they were almost invisible. By the time she was 20, she had surpassed her mother's skill. By 30, she was teaching others. By 40, when our story begins, she was the head of the Weavers Guild and the owner of the largest weaving workshop in the city. But May was not happy. Despite her success, despite her skill, despite the respect and admiration she received from everyone who knew her work, she lived in a constant state of anxiety and dissatisfaction. Because May was a perfectionist, and in her mind, nothing she created was ever quite good enough. When she finished a piece of silk, instead of feeling satisfaction at its beauty, she would immediately see its flaws. A thread slightly thicker than the others, a small irregularity in the weave, a color that wasn't quite the exact shade she had envisioned, things that no one else would ever notice, things that didn't diminish the overall beauty of the work. But to May, they were failures, evidence that she wasn't skilled enough, careful enough, good enough. She would lie awake at night replaying her work in her mind, seeing the imperfections, berating herself for not doing better. If only I had been more careful with that section, she would think. If only I had chosen a different thread. If only I had more skill, more patience, more dedication. The if-onlys were endless, and they stole her sleep, her peace, her ability to enjoy the work that everyone else found so beautiful. Her apprentices were afraid of her, not because she was cruel, but because her standards were impossibly high. She would examine their work with a critical eye, pointing out every flaw, every mistake, every deviation from perfection. "This is not acceptable," she would say, her voice tight with frustration. "Do it again, and this time, do it right." The apprentices would redo their work, and still it wasn't good enough. Nothing was ever good enough. May had one particular commission that had been consuming her for months. A wealthy merchant from the capital had ordered a silk robe to present to the emperor himself. It was to be the finest piece May had ever created, a robe worthy of an emperor, with dragons embroidered in gold thread, clouds in silver, waves in shades of blue, so subtle they seemed to move like real water. May had woven and rewoven sections of this robe dozens of times. Each attempt seemed flawed to her. The dragons weren't fierce enough. The clouds weren't delicate enough. The waves didn't flow properly. She had been working on this commission for 6 months, far longer than such a robe should take, even with its complexity, and she was nowhere near satisfied with it. The merchant had begun sending messages, asking when the robe would be ready. The deadline was approaching, but May couldn't bring herself to finish it, to declare it complete, to let it go into the world with all its imperfections. What if the emperor saw the flaws? What if her reputation was ruined? What if everyone discovered that she wasn't actually a master weaver, but just a fraud who had somehow fooled everyone? The stress was becoming unbearable. May stopped eating properly. She barely slept. Her hands began to shake from exhaustion and anxiety, which only made her weaving worse, which increased her anxiety further. She was trapped in a cycle of perfectionism that was destroying her. One evening, unable to work anymore, but unable to rest either, May walked through the city streets with no particular destination. Her feet carried her to the riverside, where a small Buddhist temple sat among ancient trees. She had passed this temple thousands of times, but had never entered. She was too busy, too focused on her work, too convinced that she didn't need whatever peace temples offered. But tonight, exhausted and desperate, she found herself walking through its gates. The temple garden was quiet, lit by paper lanterns that swayed gently in the evening. Breeze. An old nun was sweeping the stone path, moving slowly, rhythmically, as if the sweeping itself were a meditation. She looked up as May entered and smiled, her face deeply lined but radiating a calm that May had never felt in her entire life. "Welcome," the nun said simply, setting aside her broom. "You look weary." May felt tears rise suddenly, unexpectedly. "I am," she said, her voice breaking. "I am so tired." The nun gestured to a bench near a small pond. "Sit with me," she said. "Tell me what burdens you." And May, who never spoke about her struggles, who always projected competence and control, found herself pouring out everything. The impossible standards she held herself to, the constant dissatisfaction with her work, the anxiety that nothing was ever good enough, the commission for the emperor that she couldn't finish because it wasn't perfect, the fear that she was a fraud, the exhaustion that was consuming her. The nun listened without interrupting, her face full of compassion. When May finally fell silent, the nun sat quietly for a moment, then said, "What would perfect be?" May blinked, confused by the question. "What do you mean?" "This robe you're making, if it were perfect, what would that look like?" "Describe it to me." May tried to answer, but found she couldn't. "It would be flawless. Every thread exactly right, every color exactly true, every line flowing perfectly." "And who decides what exactly right means?" the nun asked gently. May paused. I do. I have a vision in my mind of what it should be." "And where did this vision come from?" From years of study, from seeing great work, from knowing what excellence looks like." "Ah," the nun said. "So perfection is an idea in your mind, a concept, a mental image, and you are trying to make the real world match this mental image." "Yes," May said. "Isn't that what mastery is? Making reality conform to your vision?" The nun smiled. "Let me show you something." She stood and walked to the pond, gesturing for May to follow. They stood at the water's edge, looking down at their reflections. The surface of the pond was slightly rippled by the breeze, making their reflections waver and distort. "Is this reflection perfect?" the nun asked. "No," May said. "It's distorted by the water's movement." "Exactly. The water is moving. The reflection changes moment by moment. It cannot be perfectly still, perfectly clear, perfectly accurate. And yet, is it not beautiful? Does it not serve its purpose as a reflection?" May looked at the wavering image, considering. "It's beautiful in its own way, but it's not perfect." "Nothing in the phenomenal world is perfect," the nun said. "Perfection is an abstract concept, an ideal that exists only in the mind. The real world is characterized by change, by variation, by what we might call imperfection. This is not a flaw in reality. This is the nature of reality." She paused, letting May absorb this. The Buddha taught about dukkha, a word often translated as suffering, but more accurately, meaning unsatisfactoriness or stress. And one of the primary causes of dukkha is our desire for things to be other than they are. our demand that reality conform to our ideal of perfection, our belief that if we just try hard enough, control enough, perfect our technique enough, we can make the real world match the perfect world in our minds. But shouldn't we strive for excellence? May asked. Shouldn't we try to make our work as good as possible? Striving for excellence is not the same as demanding a perfection, the nun said. Excellence means bringing your full attention and skill to what you're doing. It means caring about quality. It means not being careless or lazy. But perfection is something else. Perfection is an impossible standard that ensures you will always fail, always be dissatisfied, always find your work lacking. She picked up a fallen leaf from beside the pond, holding it up to the lantern light. Look at this leaf. Is it perfect? No. See how this edge is torn? See how the color is uneven? See how one side is larger than the other? And yet, is it not beautiful? Is it not exactly what a leaf should be? May looked at the leaf, seeing for the first time its imperfect beauty. Yes, she said quietly, it's beautiful. This is what the Buddha called seeing clearly, or right view. The nun continued, seeing things as they actually are, not as we wish they were. Accepting that everything in existence is characterized by imperfection, by change, by limitation. And finding peace not by trying to fix this, but by accepting it. But if I accept imperfection, won't my work become mediocre? May asked, voicing her deepest fear. Won't I stop trying? Won't I stop caring? The nun laughed gently. Look at this garden. Do you think I care about it? May looked around at the beautifully maintained space. Every plant was healthy. The paths were swept clean. The lanterns were positioned perfectly. Obviously, you care very much. Yes, the nun said. I care deeply. I tend this garden with love and attention, but I don't demand that it be perfect. I don't torture myself when a plant dies, or when weeds grow, or when the wind scatters leaves across the path I just swept. I do my best, and then I accept what is. I care without clinging. I strive without suffering. She turned to May. The same is possible for you. You can bring excellence to your weaving without demanding perfection. You can care about quality without making yourself miserable over inevitable imperfections. You can do your best and then let go, accepting that your best is enough, even when it doesn't match the impossible ideal in your mind. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water ripple and the leaves rustle. Finally, May spoke. How do I do that? How do I let go of perfectionism? You start, the nun said, by recognizing when the voice of perfectionism arises, when you hear yourself saying, this isn't good enough, or I should have done better, or if only, you pause. You notice that this is a thought, not a truth. It's your mind comparing reality to an ideal and finding reality lacking. And then you gently remind yourself, perfection is not possible. Excellence is enough. Doing my best is enough. I am enough. She paused. And you practice self-compassion. When you notice imperfection in your work, instead of berating yourself, you speak to yourself the way you would speak to a beloved student, with kindness, with understanding, with recognition that all human beings make mistakes, that all work has limitations, that imperfection is not failure, but simply reality. May felt something shift in her chest. Tears came again, but different this time. Not tears of exhaustion and despair, but tears of relief, of recognition, of a burden beginning to lift. "What about the Emperor's robe?" she asked. "I still have to finish it, and I'm so far behind schedule." "Finish it the best you can, with the time and resources you have," the nun said simply. "Bring all your skill and attention to it. Make it as beautiful as you can, and then let it go. Accept that it will not be perfect. Accept that the Emperor may or may not appreciate it. Accept that you did your best, and that is all anyone can ever do." May returned to her workshop the next morning with a different mindset. Not that all her perfectionism had disappeared. Decades of habit don't dissolve in a single evening. But something had shifted. When she looked at the Emperor's robe in progress, she tried to see it not through the lens of impossible perfection, but through the lens of reality. It was beautiful, truly beautiful. Yes, there were minor irregularities. Yes, it didn't match the perfect image in her mind, but it was silk, woven by human hands, and those hands had woven something worthy, something valuable, something that contained thousands of hours of skill and care and attention. She finished the robe over the next 2 weeks. And when the perfectionist voice arose, telling her it wasn't good enough, she noticed it. That's the voice of impossible standards. She would say to herself, "That's not truth. That's just a thought." And she would return to the present moment, to the actual weaving, to doing her best without demanding perfection. When the robe was finally complete, she delivered it to the merchant with both pride and acceptance. It was good work, her best work, and it was also imperfect because all things are imperfect. Both truths could exist simultaneously. Months later, word came back from the capital. The Emperor had been deeply moved by the robe's beauty. He wore it for an important ceremony and declared it the finest garment he had ever owned. May received this news with quiet satisfaction, but it didn't fundamentally change anything. Whether the Emperor had loved it or hated it, the robe would still have been her best effort. Her worth didn't depend on external validation any more than it depended on achieving impossible perfection. Her apprentices noticed the change in her. She was still demanding, still held high standards, but there was a new gentleness in her teaching. When she pointed out flaws in their work, she did it with understanding rather than criticism. "This section could be improved," she would say. "Try it again and see if you can make it more even. But remember, you're learning. No one expects perfection from you. I don't expect perfection from you, so don't expect it from yourself." And slowly, the workshop became a different kind of place, still dedicated to excellence, still producing beautiful work, but without the crushing weight of perfectionism. People began to enjoy their weaving again instead of dreading it. They could take satisfaction in good work without being destroyed by minor flaws. They learned to strive without suffering, to care without clinging, to create with both discipline and joy. May herself found a peace she had never known. She still noticed imperfections in her work. Her trained eye could not help but see them. But she no longer let them steal her sleep or her satisfaction. She had learned to accept the fundamental truth that the Buddha taught. Life is characterized by dukkha, by unsatisfactoriness, by the gap between how things are and how we wish them to be. And the path to peace is not making reality perfect, but accepting reality as it is. This story illuminates the Buddha's teaching on dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness or suffering that comes from our resistance to reality. The Buddha identified dukkha as the first of his 4 noble truths and it's essential to understand what he meant by this word. Dukkha is often translated simply as suffering, but this doesn't capture its full meaning. A more accurate translation might be stress, unsatisfactoriness, or the fundamental difficulty of existence. It refers to the gap between how things are and how we want them to be. The friction between reality and our expectations. The constant, subtle dissatisfaction that permeates human life when we're not at peace with what is. The Buddha wasn't being pessimistic when he taught about dukkha. He was being realistic. He was observing that life inevitably contains difficult experiences. We get sick, we age, we lose people we love, things break down, plans fail. We don't always get what we want, and we often get what we don't want. This is just the nature of existence in a world governed by impermanence and change. But the Buddha made a crucial distinction. There is the pain that comes from life's inevitable difficulties, what we might call first-order suffering. And then there is the additional suffering we create through our resistance to that pain, our refusal to accept reality, our demand that things be different, what we might call second-order suffering. The first is unavoidable. The second is optional. May's story perfectly illustrates this. Her actual weaving skills were exceptional. The work she produced was objectively beautiful. But because she held an impossible standard of perfection, because she refused to accept the natural limitations of working with physical materials in a changing world, she created tremendous suffering for herself. The gap between her ideal of perfection and the reality of her work became a source of constant torment. This is what perfectionism does. It sets up an impossible standard and then punishes us for failing to meet it. And the standard is truly impossible because perfection doesn't exist in the phenomenal world. Everything in physical reality is subject to variation, limitation, imperfection. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's simply how things are. Think about your own life. How much of your suffering comes from reality being genuinely unbearable, and how much comes from your resistance to reality? How much comes from actual pain? And how much comes from your story about the pain? Your judgment that it shouldn't be happening, your comparison of your situation to some ideal. Often, when we investigate honestly, we find that the resistance hurts more than the original difficulty. The Buddhist teacher Shinzen Young said, "Suffering equals pain times resistance." When we multiply our pain by our resistance to it, by our insistence that it shouldn't be happening, the suffering becomes much greater than the original pain. But when we can accept what is, not passively, not giving up on improvement, but simply acknowledging reality without adding layers of resistance and judgment, something remarkable happens. The pain may still be there, but the suffering decreases dramatically. We find we can bear much more than we thought when we stop fighting against it. This is what the nun taught May. The difference between striving for excellence and demanding perfection. Excellence is about doing your best with the circumstances you have, the materials you're working with, the skills you've developed. It's about bringing care and attention to what you do. It's about continuous improvement. All of this is wholesome, healthy, life-affirming. Perfectionism is different. Perfectionism demands that you transcend the limitations of reality. It insists that flaws are unacceptable. It treats natural imperfection as personal failure. It makes peace contingent on achieving an impossible standard. And this creates a prison from which there is no escape, because the standard can never be met. The Buddha's path offers freedom from this prison, not through lowering your standards or becoming careless, but through accepting the nature of reality, through seeing clearly that imperfection is not failure, it's just how things are, through recognizing that you can do excellent work, meaningful work, beautiful work without it being perfect, through understanding that your worth doesn't depend on achieving the impossible. In your own life, notice when the voice of perfectionism arises. Listen to how it speaks to you. Often, it sounds very much like a harsh critic. You should have done better. This isn't good enough. If you are really capable, this would be flawless. You're a failure. This voice may have developed as a misguided attempt to motivate you, to push you to excellence. But perfectionism doesn't actually lead to better outcomes. It leads to paralysis, anxiety, and suffering. What does lead to better outcomes is what the Buddha called right effort. Balanced, sustainable, skillful effort. Not too tight, not too loose. Like tuning the strings of a musical instrument. Caring about doing things well, but not making yourself miserable in the process. Recognizing your limitations without using them as an excuse for carelessness. Striving for improvement while accepting where you are right now. And crucially, practicing self-compassion. Speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a good friend or a beloved child, with kindness, with understanding, with recognition that making mistakes is part of being human. When you notice imperfection in your work or your behavior, instead of harsh self-criticism, try gentle acknowledgement. Yes, this could be better. I'm learning. I'll do my best to improve. And meanwhile, I accept myself as I am. This isn't lowering your standards. It's recognizing that suffering doesn't improve performance. Self-compassion, research shows, actually leads to better outcomes than self-criticism. When we feel safe and accepted, we're more likely to take risks, to learn from mistakes, to persist through difficulties. When we're constantly under attack from our own inner critic, we become defensive, avoidant, paralyzed. The teaching of dukkha, properly understood, is tremendously liberating. It's not saying life is suffering and there's nothing you can do about it. It's saying there is an inevitable component of difficulty in existence, and when you accept this instead of fighting it, you suffer much less. When you stop demanding that reality be different than it is, you find peace in the midst of life's natural ups and downs. This acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean you stop trying to improve your circumstances or reduce unnecessary pain. The Buddha himself continued teaching and working to reduce suffering in the world after his enlightenment. But he did so from a place of acceptance rather than resistance, from a place of peace rather than desperation, from a recognition that while circumstances can always be improved, your fundamental peace doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, let this teaching settle into your awareness. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of rest. You don't need to have accomplished everything on your list, or met all your goals, or lived up to every expectation. You are enough, exactly as you are, with all your limitations and imperfections. This is not settling for mediocrity. It's accepting reality. And from that acceptance, true peace and true excellence can arise. Let your body relax now. Feel the tension of perfectionism releasing from your muscles. Feel the weight of impossible standards lifting from your shoulders. You did your best today. That is enough. You are enough. Let yourself rest in this truth. Breathe slowly, deeply. Each breath is imperfect, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep. Never exactly the same as the last. And yet, each breath is exactly what it needs to be. Each breath sustains your life. Let your breathing teach you about acceptance, about working with what is, rather than demanding what should be. Rest now in the peace that comes from accepting reality, rather than fighting it. Rest in the understanding that imperfection is not failure, but simply the nature of existence. Rest in the knowledge that you are worthy of peace, not because you are perfect, but because you are. Let us pause here for a gentle moment. Allow your eyes to close if they haven't already. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the surface beneath you. Notice how gravity does this work for you. You don't have to try to relax. You simply allow relaxation to happen. This is the practice. Allowing rather than forcing. Accepting rather than demanding. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Hold it gently at the top and release it slowly through your mouth with a soft sigh. Do this once more. Breathing in peace. Breathing out the need for perfection. Breathing in acceptance. Breathing out resistance. You are here. You are present. You are exactly where you need to be in this moment. There is nowhere else to go, nothing else to achieve, no standard you need to meet right now. Just this breath, just this moment, just this peace that is always available when you stop fighting and simply allow yourself to be. Rest here. We will continue our journey in a moment. Now we turn to another essential teaching of the Buddha, the practice of non-attachment, or what is sometimes called letting go. This is one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism, often confused with detachment or not caring. But true non-attachment is something quite different. In a monastery, high in the mountains, where eagles nested on the cliffs and waterfalls thundered down into misty gorges, there lived a monk named Tenzin, who had devoted 30 years of his life to meditation practice. He was known throughout the region as a deeply realized practitioner, someone who had touched profound peace through his dedicated practice. Tenzin's daily routine was simple and austere. He rose before dawn for meditation. He ate one meal a day, consisting of rice and vegetables from the monastery garden. He spent his afternoons in walking meditation on the mountain paths or copying sacred texts. He spoke little, preferring silence. He owned almost nothing: 2 robes, a bowl, a few books, meditation, beads. But there was one possession that Tenzin treasured above all others: a small jade statue of the Buddha that had belonged to his teacher, who had died 10 years earlier. The statue was ancient, carved centuries ago by a master craftsman, and it was said to hold special blessing power. Tenzin's teacher had given it to him on his deathbed, pressing it into Tenzin's hands and saying, "Continue the practice. Keep the Dharma alive." Tenzin kept the statue on a small altar in his room. Each morning and evening, he would sit before it to meditate. He would clean it carefully with a soft cloth. He would place fresh flowers before it when flowers were available. The statue had become, without him fully realizing it, the center of his spiritual life. He believed that his teacher's presence somehow resided in it, that the statue connected him to the lineage of practitioners going back centuries. One spring, a young monk named Koji came to the monastery to study under Tenzin's guidance. Koji was eager, sincere, but also impulsive and careless. He would forget to close the meditation hall windows before rain. He would leave tools lying about instead of putting them away. He would rush through tasks, always thinking ahead to the next thing, rather than giving full attention to what was in front of him. Tenzin tried to teach him mindfulness, but Koji's habitual patterns were strong. "Slow down," Tenzin would say. "Give complete attention to each action. Washing a bowl is not a chore to rush through. It's an opportunity to practice presence." Koji would nod and agree, but then immediately fall back into his rushed, scattered way of moving through the world. One afternoon, Tenzin asked Koji to clean his room while he was teaching in the main hall. Koji agreed eagerly, wanting to please his teacher. He swept the floors, wiped the windows, straightened the bedding, and then he came to the small altar with the jade Buddha statue. The altar was dusty, so Koji decided to clean it thoroughly. He picked up the statue carefully, or so he thought, but his hands were wet from washing the floor, and the jade was slippery. The statue slipped from his grasp. Koji watched in horror as it fell. It seemed to happen in slow motion. The statue hit the stone floor and shattered into dozens of pieces. The jade, so hard and seemingly indestructible, had broken cleanly. The Buddha's serene face lay separated from the body. The hands, once pressed together in meditation, were now scattered fragments. Koji stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Then panic set in. This was his teacher's most precious possession. The statue that had belonged to Tenzin's teacher, that had been passed down through generations, and he had destroyed it through his carelessness. He considered running away from the monastery, disappearing into the mountains before Tenzin found out. He considered trying to glue the pieces back together, though he knew it was hopeless. There were too many fragments, too small, too shattered. He considered 100 different scenarios, each one ending with his teacher's disappointment and anger. Finally, knowing there was nothing else he could do, Koji gathered the pieces carefully into a cloth and went to find Tenzin. He found him in the garden, working quietly among the vegetable plants. Tenzin looked up as Koji approached, and his smile faded when he saw the young monk's stricken expression. "Teacher," Koji said, his voice shaking, "I have done something terrible." He unwrapped the cloth, revealing the broken pieces of the jade Buddha. Tenzin looked at the fragments. For a long moment, he said nothing. Koji braced himself for anger, for condemnation, for expulsion from the monastery. But when Tenzin finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost curious. "How did this happen?" Koji explained, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, teacher. I know how precious it was to you. I know it belonged to your teacher. I was careless, rushing as always. I should have been more mindful. I understand if you want me to leave." Tenzin was silent again, looking at the broken pieces. Then he did something that completely surprised Koji. He laughed. Not a harsh laugh, not a bitter laugh, but a gentle, genuine laugh of recognition. "You know," Tenzin said, "I have been waiting for this to happen for 10 years. Koji stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" Tenzin picked up the fragment with the Buddha's face, turning it in his hands. "When my teacher gave me this statue, he said, 'Continue the practice. Keep the Dharma alive.' I thought he meant to keep the statue safe, to preserve this physical object, and so I have guarded it carefully for 10 years. dusting it, protecting it, treasuring it. He paused. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't see until just now, is that I had become attached to it. It had become an object of clinging, rather than a support for practice. I wasn't honoring my teacher's memory through it. I was grasping at a physical representation of something that cannot be contained in any object. He looked at Koji. My teacher didn't tell me to keep the statue safe. He told me to continue the practice, to keep the Dharma alive. The Dharma is not this piece of jade. The Dharma is the teaching, the truth, the path. And that cannot be broken by dropping a statue. Koji sat down on the ground, overwhelmed. But teacher, aren't you angry? Aren't you sad? This was precious to you. Sad, yes, Tenzin admitted. There is a natural grief when something beautiful breaks. But angry? No. How can I be angry at you for showing me what I needed to see? You have given me a great teaching today. What teaching? Koji asked. Tenzin gestured to the broken pieces. The teaching of impermanence, the teaching of non-attachment, the teaching that when we cling to things, we suffer. I thought I had understood these teachings intellectually. I could recite the sutras, explain the concepts, but I hadn't truly let go. I was still clinging to this statue, making my sense of connection to my teacher depend on a physical object. He stood up, still holding the Buddha's face. When you dropped this statue, I felt a moment of intense upset. My stomach clenched. My mind screamed, "No!" And then, almost immediately, I felt something release, like a rope I'd been holding tightly suddenly being let go. And in that release, there was freedom. There was relief. The burden of protecting this object, of keeping it safe, of making sure nothing happened to it, that burden is gone. Tenzin walked to the edge of the garden, where a small stream tumbled down the mountainside. He knelt beside it and gently placed the fragment with the Buddha's face into the flowing water. Koji watched in amazement as the jade piece was carried away by the current, disappearing around a bend. "What are you doing?" Koji asked, alarmed. "Letting go," Tenzin said simply. He gathered the rest of the fragments and, one by one, released them into the stream. My teacher is not in this jade. My teacher is in the practice he taught me, in the wisdom he shared, in the example of how he lived. These things cannot be broken. These things I can never lose, because they're not external objects. Their understanding, their realization, their lived truth. He turned to Koji. And you, my impulsive young friend, have taught me this. You have shown me that I was still holding on, still clinging, still making my peace dependent on preserving something that was always destined to break. All form is impermanent. This statue was going to break eventually. Maybe today, maybe in 100 years, but eventually. By breaking it now, you freed me from the anxiety of trying to prevent the inevitable. They sat together by the stream for a long time, watching the water flow. Finally, Koji spoke. "I still feel terrible about being careless." "Yes," Tenzin said, "and that feeling is a good teacher too. It will help you cultivate mindfulness, help you pay attention, help you move through the world with more care. But don't let it become guilt or self-hatred. You made a mistake. The statue broke. These are just facts. They don't mean you're a bad person or a hopeless student. They mean you're human, still learning, still growing." He paused. "And honestly, I needed this. I've been too comfortable, too settled in my practice. I meditate in the same place every day, follow the same routine, protect my little altar. But the Buddha taught that we should be willing to let go of everything, to hold nothing as permanent or essential. I had forgotten that. I had made this statue into an idol, something I needed in order to feel connected to the Dharma. Now, I know that the connection was never dependent on the statue. It's always here, always available, always present. That evening, when Tenzin entered his room for his usual evening meditation, the altar looked bare without the jade Buddha. But he sat down in front of it anyway and closed his eyes. And he discovered something remarkable. The meditation was deeper, more free, more spacious than it had been in years. Without the statue to focus on, without the object that had become a crutch, he was thrown back onto direct experience. Just sitting, just breathing, just being present with awareness itself. In the weeks that followed, other things began to change in Tenzin's practice and life. He noticed other places where he was clinging, other attachments he hadn't recognized, his preference for a particular meditation cushion, his routine that had become rigid rather than supportive, his identity as an advanced practitioner that made him resistant to learning from younger monks like Koji. Gradually, with mindful attention, he learned to hold all these things more lightly, to appreciate without clinging, to use without depending, to love without grasping. This, he realized, was what the Buddha had meant by non-attachment, not caring less, but caring without the desperate need for things to remain unchanged. Koji, for his part, did become more mindful after the incident, but not out of fear or guilt, out of genuine understanding that each action matters. That presence is a gift we give to whatever we're doing. He still made mistakes. Everyone does. But he learned to meet them with less drama, less self-judgment. A broken bowl was just a broken bowl, not evidence of his fundamental unworthiness. Years later, when Koji himself became a teacher, he would sometimes tell his students about the jade Buddha statue. "My teacher's teacher's most precious possession," he would say, "and I dropped it and broke it into pieces. And you know what my teacher did? He thanked me, because I had freed him from an attachment he didn't even know he had." And the students, depending on their own level of understanding, would hear this story differently. Some would hear only the cautionary tale about being careful with precious things. Others would hear the deeper teaching about impermanence and letting go. And a few, the ones ready for it, would understand what Tenzin had understood that day by the stream, that freedom comes not from protecting ourselves from loss, but from releasing our grip on what we cannot keep anyway. This story opens a doorway into one of Buddhism's most profound and liberating teachings, non-attachment, or what in Pali is called upekkha. This is often misunderstood in Western culture as meaning we shouldn't care about things, that we should become cold or detached or indifferent. But this is completely wrong. Non-attachment is not about caring less. It's about caring without clinging. The Buddha taught that attachment, or what might be better translated as clinging or grasping, is one of the primary causes of suffering. We become attached to things, people, ideas, outcomes, experiences. We want them to stay the same forever. We build our sense of security and identity around them. And then, because everything is impermanent, we inevitably lose them, and that loss creates suffering. But here's the subtle point. The suffering doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from our clinging, our resistance to the loss, our demand that things not change. When we cling to something, we're essentially trying to freeze time, to stop the natural flow of change. And this is impossible, so we create suffering through fighting against reality. Tenzin's relationship with the jade Buddha statue perfectly illustrates this. He loved the statue, and there's nothing wrong with loving beautiful things or treasuring meaningful objects. But his love had turned into clinging. He needed the statue to feel connected to his teacher, to feel grounded in his practice. His peace had become dependent on this object remaining intact. And so, he lived with a constant low-level anxiety about protecting it, even though he might not have been consciously aware of this anxiety. When Koji broke the statue, Tenzin experienced what the Buddhist tradition calls a teaching moment. The thing he had been clinging to was suddenly gone, and he discovered something remarkable. He was okay. The loss hurt, yes. There was grief, but underneath the grief was a sense of relief, even freedom. He no longer had to protect the statue. He no longer had to make his connection to the Dharma depend on a physical object. He could rest in the direct experience of practice itself. This is what non-attachment offers: the freedom to love things, to appreciate them, to care for them, without needing them to last forever, without making our fundamental well-being dependent on them remaining unchanged. It's the ability to hold things lightly, to enjoy them while they're here, and to let them go when they pass. Think about how this might apply in your own life. What are you clinging to? What are you grasping at? It might be a relationship, a job, a possession, a particular image of yourself, a vision of how your life should be. None of these things are inherently problematic. The problem arises when we cling so tightly that we can't imagine being okay without them, when we make our peace contingent on keeping them exactly as they are. The Buddha taught that we can love people deeply without clinging to them. We can care about our work without making our worth depend on it. We can appreciate beautiful things without needing to possess them forever. We can have preferences and desires without suffering when things don't go our way. This is the middle path between indulgence and asceticism, between desperate grasping and cold indifference. Non-attachment is actually a form of deep respect. When we don't cling to people, we allow them their freedom, their own path, their own changes and growth. When we don't cling to things, we can appreciate their temporary nature instead of living in fear of their loss. When we don't cling to outcomes, we can engage fully with the process without the constant anxiety about results. And paradoxically, non-attachment often leads to deeper, more authentic relationships and experiences. When we're not desperately holding on, we can be more present. When we're not afraid of loss, we can appreciate what's here now. When we're not trying to control outcomes, we can respond more skillfully to what actually unfolds. The practice of non-attachment begins with noticing where you're clinging. What thoughts keep you awake at night? What losses do you fear? What changes do you resist? These are often indicators of where you're attached, and once you notice the attachment, you can begin to work with it. You don't work with it by forcing yourself not to care. That's just another form of violence, this time directed at your own feelings. Instead, you work with it by gently questioning, can I appreciate this without needing it to stay the same forever? Can I love this person while accepting that relationships change? Can I enjoy this possession while knowing it will eventually break or be lost? Can I pursue this goal while being okay if it doesn't work out? These questions help loosen the grip of clinging. They help you find that middle space where you can care deeply while holding lightly, where you can love without demanding, where you can engage without controlling. Tenzin's practice after losing the statue shows what non-attachment looks like in action. He didn't stop caring about his teacher's memory. He didn't become cold or indifferent, but he stopped making his connection to the Dharma depend on a physical object. He learned to find what he was seeking: connection, presence, peace, directly in his practice rather than through an external symbol. And notice what happened. His practice actually deepened. Without the crutch of the statue, he was thrown back onto direct experience. The meditation became more immediate, more alive, more real. This is often what happens when we let go of what we're clinging to. We discover that what we were truly seeking was never in the object of our clinging anyway. It was always available in direct, present awareness. In your own life, notice where you might be clutching too tightly. Not to judge yourself, attachment is natural, human, understandable, but simply to see it clearly, and then, gently, experimentally, see what it feels like to loosen your grip just a little. Not to let go completely if you're not ready, but just to hold a bit more lightly. You might discover, as Tenzin did, that there's relief in letting go, that the burden of protecting and controlling is heavier than you realized, that you can care about things without making your peace depend on them, that love without clinging is actually a deeper, freer kind of love. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, practice letting go. Let go of the day that has passed. Let go of your plans for tomorrow. Let go of your need for things to be any particular way. Let yourself rest in this moment, which requires nothing from you except presence. Let yourself be held by awareness itself, which doesn't need to grasp or protect or control anything. Feel how your body naturally lets go as you move towards sleep. Your muscles release, your breathing slows, your thinking mind quiets. This is the wisdom of the body, teaching you about non-attachment. You don't have to hold yourself awake. You can trust in the natural process. You can let go. Practice this same trust with everything in your life. Trust that you can let things go when it's time and still be okay. Trust that your fundamental well-being doesn't depend on holding on to anything. Trust that you can love fully while holding lightly. Care deeply while grasping gently. Engage completely while remaining free. This is the path the Buddha taught. Not renunciation for its own sake, not forcing yourself not to care, but the wisdom to know what can be held and what must flow. The wisdom to appreciate the temporary nature of all things. The wisdom to love without clinging, to care without controlling, to be fully present without demanding that presence last forever. Rest in this wisdom now. Let go of whatever you've been holding too tightly. Feel the relief that comes from releasing your grip. Feel the freedom that is always available when you stop trying to freeze time and simply allow life to flow. Breathe slowly. Each breath is a practice in letting go. Breathing in, filling, holding, and then releasing, emptying, allowing the breath to leave. You don't cling to the in-breath. You don't resist the out-breath. You simply allow the natural rhythm. Let this be your teacher. Let your breath show you the way of non-attachment. Let yourself settle now into deep rest, into the peace that comes from holding nothing, resisting nothing, demanding nothing, into the freedom of simply being here, now, complete and whole, exactly as you are, needing nothing more. Let us pause here once more. Take a slow, gentle breath. Feel how your body has softened over the course of this journey. Feel how your mind has begun to quiet. Feel the peace that is emerging as you let go of effort, of striving, of the need to be anywhere other than here. This moment is complete. This breath is enough. You are enough. There is nothing more you need to do tonight except rest, release, and allow sleep to come when it's ready. If these teachings serve you, if they bring you peace, know that this is what they're here for. Not to give you more to do or understand, but to help you let go, to help you rest, to help you find the peace that is always available beneath the turbulence of daily life. Breathe gently now. Feel yourself sinking deeper into stillness, deeper into quiet, deeper into the vast, peaceful awareness that is your true home. You are held. You are safe. You are free to rest. We continue now with our final teaching for tonight, bringing together all that has come before into a complete understanding of the path to peace. In a quiet hermitage at the edge of a great forest, where deer came to drink from a clear spring, and birds sang their morning songs from the branches of ancient pines, there lived a meditation master named Roshi, who had practiced for 60 years. Students came from far and wide to receive his teachings, to sit with him in silence, to learn from his decades of accumulated wisdom. But Roshi was growing old. His body was failing. His legs could no longer fold easily into meditation posture. His eyes struggled to see in dim light. His memory, once sharp and precise, sometimes wandered. He knew his time was limited, and there was one thing weighing on his heart. He had not yet found someone to carry on his teaching, to maintain this hermitage as a place of practice, to serve the students who would continue to come seeking the Dharma. He had many students, but none seemed quite ready. Some were too intellectual, all concepts and philosophy with no embodied realization. Some were sincere, but still struggling with basic practice. Some were advanced, but planned to return to their home countries. The hermitage would need someone to stay, someone rooted in this place, someone who had truly understood the teaching, not just as an idea, but as a lived reality. One autumn afternoon, as Roshi was sitting by the spring, watching the water flow endlessly from the earth, a young woman appeared on the path. She was dusty from traveling, her robes worn and patched, her feet bare despite the rocky trail. But her eyes were clear, and her presence was settled, grounded in a way that immediately caught Roshi's attention. "Teacher," she said, bowing deeply, "my name is Suki. I have traveled for many months to find you. I have heard that you teach the way of direct awakening, the path beyond words and concepts. I wish to study with you." Roshi studied her carefully. "What have you practiced until now?" he asked. "Many things," Suki said. "I spent 3 years in a monastery, learning sutras and philosophy. I spent 2 years in solitary retreat in the mountains. I have studied with 7 different teachers, each offering their own understanding of the path. And what have you realized through all this study and practice?" Suki was quiet for a moment. "I have realized that I don't know anything," she said finally. "All the concepts I learned, all the experiences I had in meditation, all the insights I thought were profound, they're all just more objects in consciousness, more things to hold on to, and I'm tired of holding on. I want to find what's real underneath all the seeking." Roshi smiled. "Then sit," he said, gesturing to a spot beside the spring. "Sit and let us discover together what you're looking for. Suki sat. She expected Roshi to give her meditation instructions, to explain some technique or practice, but he said nothing. He simply sat, watching the water flow. So she sat too, and watched the water, and waited. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Roshi didn't move. Suki's legs began to ache, but she didn't shift position. Her mind wanted to figure out what she was supposed to be doing, wanted to accomplish something, but there was nothing to accomplish. Just sitting, just water flowing, just this moment, and then this moment, and then this moment. As dusk approached, Roshi finally spoke. "What do you hear?" Suki listened. "I hear the water. I hear birds. I hear wind in the trees. I hear my own breathing." "And what hears these sounds?" Suki paused. This was a classical Zen question, designed to point the student toward direct recognition of awareness itself. She had encountered such questions before, had read the famous answers in ancient texts. But Roshi's eyes held hers, inviting something more than a rehearsed response. I don't know," she said. "Something hears, but I can't name it. I can't point to it. When I try to find what's hearing, there's just hearing happening." "Yes," Roshi said softly. "Hearing without a hearer. Seeing without a seer. Awareness without a separate entity being aware. This is what you've been seeking through all your years of practice. Not a thing to find, but the recognition of what's already always here." He stood slowly, his old joints creaking. "Come, I will show you to a small hut where you may stay. Tomorrow, we begin your training." But the next morning, when Suki came to find Roshi, he simply gestured for her to join him in his daily routine. Fetching water from the spring, preparing a simple meal, cleaning the hermitage, sitting in meditation, walking in the forest. And always, periodically, he would ask the same question in different forms. What is aware of this? What knows you're walking? What hears the silence between sounds? At first, Suki tried to figure out the answer. She would sit in meditation and try to find the awareness, to locate it, to understand it conceptually. But whenever she thought she had grasped it, Roshi would point out that what she'd grasped was just another object in awareness, not awareness itself. "You're trying too hard," he would say. "You're looking for something special, something extraordinary. But awareness is the most ordinary thing there is. It's what's present right now, reading these words. It's what's here before any thought arises to explain or understand. Stop seeking it and simply notice. You are already aware. This aliveness, this presence, this is what you are." Weeks turned into months. Suki stayed at the hermitage, practicing alongside Roshi, gradually relaxing her need to find or achieve anything. And slowly, something shifted. Not a dramatic awakening, not a special experience, but a simple recognition that had been available all along. She was washing dishes one morning, her hands in warm water, when it suddenly became clear. The awareness that knew she was washing dishes, that felt the warm water, that heard the birds singing outside. This awareness was not separate from her. It wasn't something she had to find or achieve. It was what she was, had always been, could never not be. Tears came, not of sadness, but of relief, of coming home, of recognizing what had never actually been lost. She continued washing the dishes, but everything was different. The same activity, the same sensations, but seen from a different perspective. Not from the perspective of Suki the seeker, Suki the student, Suki who needed to accomplish something, but from the perspective of awareness itself, vast and spacious and utterly at peace with whatever was arising. When she told Roshi about this recognition, he simply nodded. Yes, but don't make it into something special. Don't cling to it as an achievement. This recognition will come and go, become clear, and then obscured by thought again. The practice is to return again and again to this simple noticing. I am aware, right now, without needing to understand it or explain it or make it into anything. Just this bare fact of consciousness being present. Over the following years, Suki deepened in this recognition, not through gaining anything new, but through letting go of the subtle ways she was still seeking, still trying to get somewhere, still believing enlightenment was something other than what was already here. And as she let go, as she relaxed into simple presence, a profound peace established itself. Not the peace of having no problems or challenges, but the peace of resting as awareness rather than identifying completely with the changing contents of awareness. When Roshi knew his death was approaching, he called Suki to him. I am glad you came, he said, his voice now weak. You have understood what I have tried to teach, not as an idea, but as a lived reality. Will you stay here, maintain this hermitage, serve the students who come seeking the Dharma? Suki bowed. I will stay, teacher, but I don't feel qualified to teach. I'm still learning, still practicing, still discovering. Roshi smiled. That is why you're qualified. The ones who think they know everything, who believe they've achieved complete awakening, who have stopped being students, they are the ones who cannot teach. You know that the practice never ends, that deepening is always possible, that each moment is new. This humility, this openness, this is what students need to see. He paused, gathering his strength. Teach them what you have learned. That peace is not found through gaining anything. That awareness is always already present. That what they seek, they already are. Teach them to stop seeking and simply notice. To stop trying to get somewhere and simply be here. To stop demanding special experiences and simply appreciate the ordinary miracle of consciousness being present right now. When Roshi died, Suki performed the funeral rites with a quiet grace. She felt sadness at his passing, but underneath the sadness was an unshakable peace. Because she understood that what Roshi truly was, the awareness that had looked through his eyes, the consciousness that had animated his form, had not died. Only the form had changed. The essence, the awareness itself, was eternal, unchanging, always present. She continued living at the hermitage, teaching those who came. Her teaching was simple and direct, stripped of unnecessary complexity. She would sit with students and ask them the same questions Roshi had asked her. What is aware right now? What knows your breathing? What is present before any thought arises? And gradually, one by one, students would have the same recognition she'd had at the sink that morning years ago. Not a dramatic awakening, but a simple seeing. I am already what I'm seeking. Awareness is already present. Peace is already here, has always been here, only obscured by the constant seeking, the endless grasping, the belief that it must be somewhere else, sometime else, somehow else. This recognition that you are not a limited self seeking, awakening, but rather awareness itself temporarily identified with a limited self. This is the ultimate teaching of Buddhism. Not a philosophy to believe, but a reality to recognize directly in your own immediate experience. And here, As sleep calls you gently into its embrace, this teaching comes full circle. What is aware of your tiredness? What knows you're ready for sleep? What is present as your thinking mind quiets and your body releases into rest? This awareness, this consciousness that is reading these words right now, that feels your body breathing, that knows you exist, this is what you are. Not the body, which is always changing, not the thoughts, which come and go, not the emotions, which flow like water, but the awareness that knows all of these, that is present through all changes, that cannot be found because it is what is looking. Rest in this tonight, not as an idea, but as a direct recognition. You are awareness itself, vast and spacious and perfectly at peace, temporarily experiencing life through this particular body and mind. The challenges, the difficulties, the joys, the sorrows, all of this arises in you, the infinite awareness. None of it can disturb your fundamental nature, just as waves cannot disturb the ocean's depths. Let yourself be what you are, not the struggling self, not the seeking self, but awareness itself. Let this recognition carry you into sleep, into rest, into the peace that is always already yours. You are home. You have always been home. There is nowhere else to go, nothing else to find, no one else to become. Just this, just now, just awareness being present, perfect, complete, whole. Rest now, beloved consciousness. Rest in what you are. Rest in the peace that cannot be lost, because it is your very nature. Rest deeply, knowing you are held by the infinite awareness that birthed the stars and breathed through all beings. Sleep well, dream peacefully, and know that when you wake, this same awareness will be here, as it has always been, as it will always be. You are that awareness. You are that peace. You are that home. Rest now. Simply rest.